Sir, you'll need to take seat 28C or leave the plane, the gate agent said, his tone sharp and final. And that limp? It's making other passengers uncomfortable. William Thompson looked up from his aisle seat, the one he'd booked 3 months ago with his disability benefits because of shrapnel wounds that made sitting upright a daily battle. I paid extra for this seat, Bill said quietly, his weathered hands gripping the armrest. I have a back injury from— Sir, Marcus Johnson interrupted, barely looking at the old man's VA medical card. We have a platinum member who needs aisle access for her connecting flight. Company policy is clear. The 74-year-old veteran studied the young agent's face. Smooth, confident, unburdened by the weight of real responsibility. Bill had seen that look before, in young soldiers who thought rules mattered more than people. So he stood, wincing as the metal fragments in his spine caught fire and limped toward the back of the plane. What happened 9 minutes later would change everything. If you believe no veteran should be treated this way, type honor below. Your voice matters more than you think. Gate 14 at Dallas-Fort Worth International hummed with the usual pre-dawn energy. It was barely 5:45 a.m., but Bill Thompson had been sitting there for over an hour, hands folded, spine straight, despite the constant ache. At 74, he looked exactly like what he was. An old soldier in pressed khakis and a faded polo shirt, worn boots polished to a dull shine. The American flag pin on his collar caught the fluorescent light as he shifted slightly, the only movement that betrayed his discomfort. He'd learned long ago to sit still, to breathe through pain, to endure. It was a skill forged in the deserts of Kuwait, refined in the years since. This flight to Phoenix meant everything. His battle buddy from Desert Storm, Sergeant Tommy Vega, had finally lost his fight with cancer. The funeral was tomorrow, and Bill had promised Tommy's widow he'd be there. It was a promise you didn't break, not when it came to brothers. That's why he'd paid the extra $89 for seat 12A, not luxury, necessity. The aisle seat gave him room to stretch his damaged spine, space to shift when the shrapnel shifted. The shrapnel in Bill's spine had a sound, a tiny metallic whisper with each movement like broken wind chimes. Only he could hear it, a private symphony of sacrifice. 3 surgeries hadn't been able to remove all the metal from his back. Some souvenirs, the doctors said. You carry forever. Bill had boarded early with the disabled passengers. No fuss, just a quiet thank you to the gate agent and a steady hand on the rail. When he reached 12A, he'd lowered himself carefully, stowed his small duffel, and exhaled, the first easy breath he'd taken since leaving his apartment. But comfort was temporary. It always was. Marcus Johnson approached with purpose, his crisp uniform and confident stride marking him as someone who'd never been told no. He stopped beside Bill's row, tablet in hand, practiced smile in place. Excuse me, sir. Are you the passenger in 12A? Bill nodded once. Yes. Marcus crouched slightly, still smiling. We have a situation. One of our platinum members missed her connection due to weather delays. She's wheelchair-bound and needs aisle access for her Phoenix to Seattle flight. Your seat is the only aisle available in premium economy. Bill's brow furrowed. The words hit him like distant artillery. You heard them coming, but impact was always worse than expected. This is my assigned seat. I booked it specifically because of a service-connected back injury. The smile never wavered, but Marcus's eyes hardened slightly. I understand, sir, and we really appreciate your cooperation. It's just for this flight. Bill looked down at his hands, scarred from desert sand and motor oil, steady despite everything they'd seen. He thought of Tommy's widow, of the promise made to a dying man, of the 3-hour flight ahead with nowhere to stretch his spine. What's the alternative? He asked quietly. Marcus tapped his screen. We can offer you 28C. It's in our comfort section. Middle seat? Yes, sir. It's the only seat left unoccupied. The silence stretched thin between them. Bill knew that seat. Cramped, no leg room, sandwiched between strangers. 3 hours of agony that would leave him barely able to stand at Tommy's funeral. Sir, Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of corporate policy, if you choose not to move, We may have difficulty accommodating our platinum member, and that could delay departure. There it was. The implication hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Move, or be the problem. Cooperate, or hold up the flight. Bill felt the familiar weight of other passengers' stares. A businessman in row 11 glanced up from his laptop. A woman across the aisle lowered her phone. The quiet judgment of people who didn't understand what it meant to pay for dignity with disability money. His jaw tightened imperceptibly. He looked up at Marcus, voice calm but controlled. "My name is William Thompson, Staff Sergeant, United States Army, retired. I'd like it noted that I'm giving up a medically necessary seat under pressure." Marcus only nodded, already motioning toward the gate. "I'll make a note, sir." As Bill unbuckled his seatbelt and rose stiffly, gripping the headrest for balance, he caught sight of a man 3 rows back. Crisp, military uniform, silver eagles on his collar, watching intently. Their eyes met for a moment, soldier recognizing soldier, before Bill turned and began his slow walk toward the back of the plane. Nobody offered to help. Nobody said a word, but someone was taking notes. Seat 28C was everything Bill had feared. Narrow, cramped, wedged between a college kid with headphones and a businessman who immediately claimed both armrests. The overhead reading light flickered intermittently, casting harsh shadows that made the cabin feel smaller than it was. Bill lowered himself slowly, each movement calculated to minimize the fire in his spine. The middle seat forced him to hunch forward, shoulders drawn in, legs pressed awkwardly against the seat back in front. Within minutes, the familiar burning sensation began. Shrapnel shifting against nerve endings, metal fragments finding new ways to remind him of February 24th, 1991. The businessman on his left spread his laptop wider, elbows encroaching on Bill's space like he owned it. The college kid on his right lived in his own world of music and movies, earbuds sealing him off from the human being struggling beside him. No one made eye contact. No one offered space. No one seemed to notice the old man slowly disappearing into his own pain. 3 rows ahead, the platinum passenger settled into 12A with a grateful smile. She was younger than Bill had expected, maybe 50, and clearly uncomfortable about the situation. She glanced back once, caught sight of him crammed into the middle row, and quickly looked away. The businessman beside Bill answered a phone call, his voice loud and self-important. "Yeah, I'm on the plane. Should be in Phoenix by 9. No problems. Got an aisle seat, plenty of room to work." Bill shifted slightly, trying to ease the pressure on his lower spine. The movement bumped the businessman's elbow, earning him a sharp look and an exaggerated sigh. No apology was offered. None was expected. The college kid's music leaked from his headphones, some aggressive beat that matched the rhythm of Bill's mounting discomfort. Every bass thump seemed to vibrate through the thin seat cushion, adding another layer to his suffering. A 20-something in row 26 had started filming, probably for TikTok. "Look at this old guy squeezed in the middle seat," she whispered to her phone. "Why do they even fly if they can't handle it?" The businessman beside Bill heard the comment and glanced over with renewed interest. He noticed Bill's hand pressed against his shirt pocket, protecting something. "What are you fidgeting with?" the businessman asked with casual cruelty. "Some kind of good luck charm?" He reached toward Bill's pocket. "My kid collects those military trinkets from surplus stores." Bill's hand closed protectively over the pocket. "Please don't," he said quietly. "Come on, let me see. Is it one of those fake medals? We've had too many stolen valor cases lately." The whispered symphony of shrapnel in Bill's spine crescendoed as his body tensed. These weren't just Tommy's dog tags in his pocket. They were sacred ground. Bill closed his eyes and tried to find that place he'd learned to go during the worst moments. The mental bunker where pain couldn't follow. But the cramped seat made it impossible. Every breath pushed his spine against the unforgiving seatback. Every slight turbulence sent new shocks through his damaged nervous system. Heroes don't ask for comfort. They endure. A memory surfaced unbidden. Tommy Vega pulling him from a burning Humvee, shrapnel already buried deep in his back, both of them bleeding and alone in the desert. "We don't leave our own behind," Tommy had gasped through the smoke and chaos. Bill opened his eyes and stared at the seat back in front of him. The irony wasn't lost on him. 30 years later, he was being left behind by his own countrymen. Not in combat, but in comfort. Not by enemies, but by indifference. The plane lifted off, carrying him toward Tommy's funeral at 35,000 feet of dignified suffering. In row 9, Colonel James Mitchell adjusted his dress uniform and tried to pretend he hadn't seen everything. 20 minutes into the flight, Bill Thompson had learned to breathe in small, measured doses. Anything deeper sent lightning through his spine, so he adapted, the way soldiers always adapt. Shallow breaths, micro-adjustments, survival through increments. His hands rested on his knees, fingers interlaced to keep them steady. The businessman had taken a call and was loudly discussing quarterly projections, his elbow still claiming territory that wasn't his. The college kid had fallen asleep, headphones askew, leaving Bill truly alone in his middle-seat purgatory. Nobody was watching when Bill's right hand moved to his shirt pocket. His fingers found the small object there, smooth metal, worn edges, heavier than its size suggested. Tommy's dog tags, the ones pressed into his palm at the VA hospital 3 days ago when his battle buddy drew his last breath. "Take these to Marie," Tommy had whispered. Tell her I kept my promise, never left you behind." Now Bill held those tags through the fabric of his pocket, feeling their familiar weight. 30 years of friendship reduced to 2 pieces of stamped aluminum, 2 tours of duty, 3 Purple Hearts between them, a brotherhood forged in fire and maintained through decades of holiday calls and hospital visits. The shrapnel in his spine flared again, but Bill didn't flinch. He'd endured worse for better reasons. This pain was temporary, a few hours of discomfort between him and keeping his word to a dying friend. He could bear anything for Tommy's memory. Around him, the plane hummed with quiet activity. Flight attendants served drinks. Passengers typed on laptops, watched movies, slept peacefully in their comfortable seats. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that 3 rows back, a man was holding the last piece of his best friend while his body slowly broke apart. Bill's thumb traced the outline of the dog tags through his pocket. Marie would be waiting at the Phoenix airport, probably wearing that blue dress Tommy always said made her look like an angel. She'd cry when he handed her the tags, and he'd have to be strong enough to hold her up while his own spine barely held him up. For the first time in 30 years of service, Bill Thompson felt his eyes burn with something that wasn't sand or smoke. 1 tear, just one. He caught it before it fell. The businessman finished his call and immediately started another, this time about golf schedules and weekend plans. His voice was bright with the confidence of someone who'd never had to choose between dignity and function, never had to measure comfort in degrees of bearable pain. Bill closed his eyes again and held Tommy's tags a little tighter. In row 9, Colonel James Mitchell finished reading the passenger manifest and made a decision that would change everything. The seatbelt sign had just chimed off when Colonel James Mitchell unbuckled himself and stood. At 52, he carried himself with the bearing of a man who'd spent 3 decades in uniform, spine straight, shoulders square, every movement deliberate and purposeful. His dress blues were immaculate, silver eagles gleaming under the cabin lights. He'd been watching Bill Thompson since takeoff, watching him suffer in silence, adjust his position in tiny increments, hold something precious in his shirt pocket like a lifeline. The colonel recognized the signs. He'd seen them in 100 different veterans, in a dozen different contexts. Pain worn quietly, dignity maintained at cost. Mitchell walked slowly down the aisle, his trained eye taking inventory. Row 28. Middle seat. An old soldier bent forward like he was trying to disappear, while a businessman talked loudly about profit margins and a college kid slept with the oblivion of youth. When he reached Bill's row, Colonel Mitchell stopped. "Excuse me," he said quietly. Bill looked up, startled. The businessman paused mid-sentence in his phone call. The college kid stirred but didn't wake. Mitchell's voice carried the authority of command, but his tone was respectful. "Staff Sergeant Thompson?" Bill blinked, confused. "Sir?" "Colonel James Mitchell, United States Army." He extended his hand. "I couldn't help but notice you'd been moved from your original seat." The businessman ended his call, suddenly interested. Other passengers began to turn, sensing something significant was happening. "Yes, sir," Bill said carefully. "There was a situation." Colonel Mitchell nodded once, then turned toward the front of the plane. His voice rose just enough to carry, "Ladies and gentlemen, I need your attention for a moment." Conversations stopped. Phones lowered. Every head in the cabin turned toward the man in dress blues. "My name is Colonel James Mitchell. I'm currently serving as commander of the 1st Armored Division at Fort Bliss." He paused, letting that sink in. "The gentleman in seat 28C is Staff Sergeant William Thompson, a decorated combat veteran who served our country with honor in Operation Desert Storm." Bill's face flushed. "Sir, that's not necessary." Mitchell raised a hand gently. "Staff Sergeant Thompson was wounded in action while serving in Kuwait. He suffers from a service-connected spinal injury that requires specific seating accommodations. This morning, he was asked to give up the aisle seat he paid for with his disability benefits so that another passenger could have access." The cabin had gone completely silent. The businessman beside Bill slowly closed his laptop. The college kid had woken up and removed his headphones. "Now," Colonel Mitchell continued, "I don't know about the rest of you, but where I come from, we don't ask our wounded warriors to suffer so that others can be more comfortable. We don't force men who've already given their backs for this country to break them a little more for our convenience." He turned back to Bill. "Staff Sergeant, would you do me the honor of accepting my seat in first class?" Bill's mouth opened, but no words came. "I insist," Mitchell said firmly. "It's 3A, plenty of legroom, full recline. I'll take your seat here." The businessman suddenly found his voice. "Colonel, that's not necessary. He can have my seat in 11B. "No," came a voice from across the aisle. A woman in row 27 stood up. "He can have my aisle seat." Another voice. "Sir, take mine in row 15. Suddenly, the entire cabin was offering seats, voices overlapping in a chorus of delayed decency. But Colonel Mitchell raised his hand again. "Thank you all, but my offer stands. Staff Sergeant Thompson has earned first-class treatment, and that's what he's going to get." He looked down at Bill, who was blinking rapidly, struggling to process what was happening. "Tommy Vega was my friend too," Mitchell said quietly, so only Bill could hear. "February 24th, 1991, Highway 80. You pulled me out first, before Tommy, before Rodriguez. My left leg was gone, but you said, 'Colonel first.' That's protocol. You saved 4 of us that day." Bill's hand went instinctively to his shirt pocket, to Tommy's dog tags. "He said you never left anyone behind." "Well, neither do we. Real rank isn't worn, it's earned." The businessman was already gathering his belongings. The college kid stood up quickly, shamefaced. And as Bill slowly, carefully rose from seat 28C, the entire cabin erupted in applause. Not loud, not forced. Just the steady sound of recognition, of respect, of a wrong being made right. As Bill walked toward first class, every passenger he passed nodded respectfully. Some reached out to shake his hand. Others simply said, "Thank you for your service," and meant it. When he reached seat 3A, Bill lowered himself into the leather chair and finally, his spine found relief. Colonel Mitchell leaned down and whispered, "Tommy's watching, Staff Sergeant, and he's proud." The plane touched down in Phoenix at 8:47 a.m., wheels kissing the tarmac with a gentle thud that Bill Thompson felt through the plush leather of seat 3A. For the first time in years, he'd slept on a plane. Really slept. Not just closed his eyes and endured. The seat had reclined fully, supporting his damaged spine in ways he'd forgotten were possible. As passengers began gathering their belongings, Bill remained seated. Not from pain this time, but from a kind of wonder he couldn't quite name. The businessman from 11B walked past and paused. "Sir," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology and a thank you." Bill nodded, not trusting his voice. Colonel Mitchell approached from his middle seat in row 28, where he'd spent the flight reading military reports without a single complaint. "How are you feeling, Staff Sergeant?" "Better than I have in years," Bill admitted. "Good. Because Marie Vega is waiting for you at baggage claim. I called ahead, told her you were coming home in style. Bill's hand found Tommy's dog tags in his pocket one last time. "Thank you, Colonel. Tommy would have—" "Tommy knew exactly what kind of man he was sending to watch over his wife," Mitchell interrupted. "That's why he trusted you with this mission." As they walked off the plane together, the gate agent, Marcus Johnson, stood waiting near the jet bridge. His confident swagger was gone, replaced by something that looked like shame. "Mr. Thompson," he said, stepping forward. "I want to apologize. I should have—" "You did your job," Bill said simply. "Nothing more, nothing less." Marcus looked like he wanted to say more, but Bill was already walking past, Colonel Mitchell at his side like an honor guard. At baggage claim, Marie Vega stood clutching a photo of her late husband, tears already streaming down her face. She was wearing that blue dress, the one Tommy had always said made her look like an angel. When she saw Bill approaching, she ran to him. Not the careful approach of someone worried about his injuries, but the full force embrace of someone who'd been waiting too long to thank the man who'd brought her husband home from war. "He talked about you every day," she whispered against his shoulder. "Every single day." Bill held her up while she cried, his own eyes burning with tears he'd been holding back for 3 days. Behind them, other passengers from the flight watched respectfully, giving them space but bearing witness to a moment that mattered. Later, at Tommy's funeral, Bill sat in the front row beside Marie, his spine straight and pain-free for the first time in months. When they folded the flag from Tommy's casket, the honor guard handed it to Marie first, then rendered a crisp salute to Bill. "For bringing him home," the young soldier whispered. That evening, Bill received a call from the airline's corporate office. Not an apology, something better. Effective immediately, all combat veterans with documented service-connected disabilities would receive automatic aisle seat assignments at no additional charge. The policy would be called the Thompson Protocol. Marcus Johnson's termination letter arrived 3 days later. The viral video, filmed by a passenger but showing his dismissive treatment, had reached 12 million views. American Airlines CEO personally signed the letter. The Platinum member in 12A found Bill after the flight. "I didn't know," she said, her wheelchair gleaming under the Phoenix sun. "I'm a veteran too. Iraq, 2003, I would never have— I'm so sorry." Bill hung up and looked at the photo on his mantle. Tommy in desert camouflage, arm around his shoulder, both of them grinning despite the sand and heat and uncertainty of war. "We never left anyone behind," he said to the empty room. "And we never will." The next morning, when he walked to his mailbox, Bill Thompson held his head a little higher. His back still hurt. That would never change. But something else had shifted. Something deeper than bone and tissue. He had been seen. He had been honored. He had been home. Some uniforms fade. Some men never do. Some battles end with victory parades. Others end with a single moment of recognition, a voice that says, "We remember." A seat that becomes sacred ground. Not all wounds bleed, not all scars show. But every single one deserves a seat at the table, or at least an aisle on the plane. 22 veterans take their own lives every day in America. Sometimes it starts with 1,000 small indignities. Sometimes it starts with a middle seat. In our darkest moments, dignity still finds a way, often in the quietest places through the simplest gestures. Not everyone who helps wants recognition. Some just need to know that today, someone isn't traveling in pain. Sometimes that's enough to change everything. If this story touched you as much as it touched me while researching it, consider supporting this work. Each story takes hours to be treated with the respect these veterans deserve. Buy Me a Coffee link is pinned in the first comment. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it now. We have more stories that need to be told. See you in the next one.